what is going on, everybody? Hope everybody enjoyed ringing in the new year. We went from 2025 to 2026. We got treated to two phenomenal playoff games. First one that ended the 2025, year and season was Ohio State and Miami, with Miami pulling off the upset. Then we had like two blowouts with Indiana beating the dog pretty much piss out of Alabama. And then we also had Texas Tech getting shut out by Oregon, as well as probably the game of the bowl season so far, in my opinion, between Ole Miss and Georgia. I know that we are called SEC Talk. It hasn't been a pretty bowl season for the SEC. I think only 2 wins overall for the conference. Just overall season, I think it was a disappointment. We'll see if Ole Miss can win a national championship for the conference. I thought a big test on Thursday night. In the Fiesta Bowl against Miami. So more recapping the previews. We do have 2 semifinal games. And then we'll also get into some more transfer portal news as the portal officially opened on January 2nd. So with all that being said, Wade, how was your weekend? How did you spend, ringing in the new year?
Yeah, ringing the new year here in Baton Rouge. Just kind of took it easy, lit a fire. It's starting to feel like winter here until this week when it's going to get back to 80, but hey, that's okay. But yeah, just good quality time. Watched the Sugar Bowl. I didn't really watch the other 2 games in entirety, but I think it was probably okay. They seemed kind of boring. But the Sugar Bowl, now that was exciting. We'll definitely look forward to recapping that one and seeing what our viewers have to say.
Yeah, so let's go ahead. Before we get into our recap and previews, as always, if you've had any questions pertaining to it, I know that pretty much the majority of your teams in the conference are pretty much done unless you're an Ole Miss fan. So if you have any questions pertaining to maybe what's going on in the transfer portal, just looking ahead to the 2026 season, feel free to leave us a comment. We are live both on Facebook and on YouTube, so the comments are open on both platforms. So if you have anything that you want to drop, any questions or comments, we will get to it at the end of our show. So let's go ahead and dive right into our recapping our games. First up, we're going to get into our quarterfinal games. And the first one, like I mentioned, that really kicked off this weekend that we had. It was number 10 Miami versus number 2 Ohio State. I know pretty much here on the show, we all picked Ohio State in this one. I was very wrong in this one. I thought that Ohio State was just going to blow the doors off of Miami. I just didn't really trust Miami's offense, especially the way that they really had played, especially in game number 1, only putting up 10 points against the Texas A&M defense that I thought was a little bit like not up to the level of par of Ohio State. Boy, Miami continues to prove me wrong as Miami wins this one 24-14. And they got off to a hot start. Miami scored on one of their first possessions, and then they got a pick 6. They were up 14-0 early on in that game. Ohio State was able to tack on a touchdown early on, but it just felt like Miami was really in complete control. But this defense is really elite compared to Ohio State's on paper. I mean, Ohio State's defense has really been solid. You could say they maybe haven't played the level of competition that like Miami has played this season, but it was actually, Carson Beck, he didn't really have to do too much in this game. He was more of a game manager. He did get a lot of big third downs with using his legs. You saw Mark Fletcher continue to be a dominant running back for the Canes. But that defensive line for Miami was sensational against Ohio State. Julian Sayin just didn't really have much time to throw in this one as Miami was able to generate a lot of pressure. And they were able to limit Ohio State's big-time receivers like Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. So overall, this defense so far for 2 games to hold a really talented Texas A&M team to 3 points, and then going to Dallas and holding Ohio State that has really been dominant pretty much the majority of the season to only 14 points. So this was definitely a surprise to me. I know that you also picked Ohio State. So what are your thoughts about this game and what is really the ceiling now for Miami going into the semifinals?
Yeah, this Miami team is legit. I mean, the defense especially, like you mentioned, we thought maybe it was because of the wind or A&M just kind of having some late season struggles, but definitely not the case if you're able to shut down Ohio State. Although I will say the Buckeyes have come out flat their last 2 times on the field. Even at times in the Michigan game, they were kind of flat on offense. So maybe this group was not as high powered as we thought. But regardless, Miami came to play. They had a pick six deep in their own territory. Ohio State, was marching down the field. Maybe that was a momentum swing that could have happened, but they took 7 points the other way. And then, just a nice long drive there at the end to punch one in. It was the icing on the cake. So watch out. I mean, I know Ole Miss is hot right now, but that defense, man, it looks hard to score on.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's going to be really a key test, Trinidad Chambliss and that offense, how to be able to operate against that defense. On Ohio State, the regular season was about as good as you can get, but that was definitely a disappointing finish. The Indiana game, their offense only putting up 10 points, and then only now putting up 14 points. So we're going to be talking about the first round buys after we really conclude this recap. So we'll get into the discussion to see, maybe if the format needs to change, but we will definitely get into that. But big win for Miami. They will move on now to the Fiesta Bowl to face off against Ole Miss. And now let's go on now to our New Year's Day games. This one kicked off today. Number 5 seed Oregon versus number 4 seed Texas Tech. So sorry for that. I was just trying to breeze through this slide, but Texas Tech. Really, I picked this. I picked Texas Tech. It was just an awful couple of picks for the last couple of games here in the bowl season. I lost my lead in the bowl slate. I think that Wade now is on top of that list. He has a pretty comfortable lead now. But Oregon 23-0. Texas Tech's offense, who has really been a roller coaster ride this season. I trusted Texas Tech's defense in this one. I just thought that their offense was able to generate enough points, especially against a very tough Oregon defense, because really both of these defenses are playing complementary football. But it was Oregon and their offense was just too much for Texas Tech. Usually Texas Tech generates a lot of turnovers, but Oregon was able to play a clean game in this one. And Baron Morton just had an awful game for Texas Tech. So we'll see what they do at the quarterback position. I know that they are linked to 2 quarterbacks right now at the moment with Sam Levitt and Brendan Sorsby. So they're definitely looking towards the future. I'm sure that putting up a goose egg is only going to help the Red Raiders' case of just putting a whole lot of more money into the transfer portal heading into the 2026 season. But for Oregon, I feel like they are one of the more complete teams, especially if they play like this every time. I mean, the offense I know isn't like the high-powered offense that you were so used to in the past. Dante Moore, I know that he doesn't really have that many years of experience as a starting quarterback, but he definitely really played well against a very solid Texas Tech team. So not really much to say in this one. It was a complete complete dominance for Oregon. So this is going to be a team that's definitely going to be a tough out. I know that they do have to face off against Indiana. Last time that we saw both of those teams, it was a back and forth shootout. For pretty much 3 quarters, Indiana got a late score to pretty much put the score away. But this is definitely going to be an Oregon team that is going to be scared to face off against the Indiana team yet again.
Yeah. I think Oregon was kind of slept on. I found myself kind of going back and forth on this one. I liked Texas Tech, especially on defense, but I just feel like nobody's talking about Dante Moore, and I wouldn't be surprised if an NFL team falls in love with him and he's the number 1 overall pick, but we'll have to see. I just think that he's got a lot of the traits you want to see in a star quarterback. And he really willed his team to victory here. But this Oregon defense is also underrated. I mean, Dan Lanning, that's his bread and butter is defense. That's his background, SEC guy. So, Oregon's flashy on offense sometimes. And maybe this year they haven't been as good on offense as maybe they were under Bo Nix or someone like that. But, I mean, I think that the way that defense is playing, it really elevates this team. And as you can see, maybe they only need 20 points to win a game. And I think that goes a long way against a very similar team in Indiana that's got a very strong defense as well. So I think we're going to be in line for a dogfight, probably with the winner scoring maybe even less than 25 points. So I know we're going to get to that in a bit, but I don't think this was just a knock on Texas Tech. I think this is just how this Oregon team functions, and we finally got to see it against some legit competition.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So, yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that rematch between Oregon and Indiana. So now let's move on to the next semifinal. This was our mid-afternoon game all the way out there in Pasadena, California in the Rose Bowl. Number 9 seed Alabama versus number 1 seed Indiana, and it was over pretty much by the half. Indiana dominated this one from start to finish. Fernando Mendoza really submitted himself. Really no doubts that he was definitely the clear Heisman winner in this one. I know that Diego Pavia put up some numbers against Iowa, but for Fernando Mendoza to do it on a stage like this against a really solid Alabama defense, in the story of this one, Indiana's all offensive line dominated Alabama's defensive line, and that's probably something that you want to set a couple of years back with Alabama under Nick Saban. This story's definitely changed. I mean, Indiana, you're already looking at the talent that they're bringing in the transfer portal. It's announced I know a couple of hours ago that they got Josh Hoover, the TCU quarterback, as well as Nick Marsh. So Indiana's slowly building. Like if they win a national championship, I know that it's too early to call them a dynasty, but they are definitely going to be a powerhouse, especially the way that Kurt Cignetti is recruiting, both on the trenches as well as bringing in some weapons on the offense side of the ball. And then whenever you have that recruiting, like, hey, we just had that Heisman Trophy quarterback winner, we can develop like him like we did. But Indiana, I was very, very impressed on both sides of the ball. Indiana's defense continues to be one of the most elite in college football. Obviously, Ty Simpson goes out with an injury in this game. He was benched in the third quarter. I was very impressed, though, with the backup and Mack. I know that Indiana probably at that point was giving up. I mean, they were up 30-3 at that point. But Indiana, I mean, right now, they are definitely my pick to win the national championship because I picked Georgia. Obviously, that didn't pan out. But I think that Indiana's going to have to beat themselves, to be honest with you, because this Indiana team is just a wagon at this point in this season. They have a ton of playmakers. I mean, the running back just continues to be impressive. And then the way that Fernando Mendoza has been playing along the way with his defense, it just feels like they are going to have to beat themselves at this point for them to get bounced out in this field of 4 now. But for Alabama's sake, I mean, I think that we saw the crumbles early on this season. Like the Florida State game probably should have told us all about this game. They were able to bounce back with a couple of big wins, with Tennessee and Georgia, and then the SEC championship. They get waxed by Georgia. They go down 17-0 against Oklahoma. They ended up responding, ended up pulling out a victory. Same things happen here. Indiana goes up 17-0, but Indiana's offense isn't built like Oklahoma's offense. They can actually move the football very effectively. So I knew that at that point, Alabama was pretty much done. But you really got to be impressed with this Indiana team. I know that I really want to highlight them. We've had our time with Alabama, to be honest with you. But this was a pure dominant win for the Hoosiers. And I think that this is definitely going to be a statement for where this program is going to be heading here in the near future.
Yeah, I think the on-field statement is to be expected at this point. I mean, they've proven themselves against Oregon and Ohio State and now Alabama. But I think what kind of got to me today was the off the field presence. This, like you said, this team's not going anywhere. They're not trying to be a Cinderella story, a one-hit wonder, whatever you want to call it. They went out and got one of the top quarterbacks in the portal, probably the top receiver in the portal. So this team's, they're playing to win. They're playing for keeps. And I think it's just a great story with Cignetti, just kind of getting his shot a little bit later than some of the other coaches in this. He's kind of the old school guy left of the bunch. And then going into this season, Indiana had the worst winning percentage of all FBS programs, and now they could very well probably are the odds-on favorite to win it all. So yeah, that's just kind of crazy in its own right. But for Alabama, I mean, this was a little bit of a head scratcher. I thought Ty Simpson was going to be able to pace with Fernando Mendoza. I thought that, Alabama had figured out its passing game. We knew their running game was weak, but man, Indiana just stuffed them on all fronts. They couldn't get anything going. And the Alabama defense, I mean, it looked very, very shaky, kind of like it did against Oklahoma in the beginning of the game. And they weren't able to rebound like they did in that first round matchup. So just an absolute blowout here. I it's got to be crazy to say that you like the direction of this Indiana team better than the direction of the Alabama program, but
But it's
I don't
true.
think that's a stretch to say.
No, not at all. But two back-to-back Rose Bowls now. I mean, we saw a blowout last year with Ohio State against Oregon, and now Indiana and Alabama. We will see if that trend continues heading into the next season. We do have one final one, and let's go ahead and talk about the game of the week, in my opinion. That is the Sugar Bowl, the number 6 seed Ole Miss versus number 3 seed Georgia. Now, this was just a back-and-forth game. Pretty similar to last year's game, though it got off not how it did for last time that these two teams did face off earlier this season in Athens. It felt like both teams were in the 30s before it even got to the fourth quarter. Like the defenses had a stronger start than the first game. Kawan Lacey didn't have that many big runs. I know that Nate Frazier was up to like 50 yards in no time. But the two quarterbacks in this one, especially Trinidad Chambliss, the plays that he made in the fourth quarter was just insane. I mean, honestly, like if it wasn't for Fernando Mendoza, if Trinidad had a full season, it probably wouldn't even be a discussion who probably should have won the Heisman. But this Ole Miss team, the defense especially, I know that everyone's going to be talking about the offense. Yes, they did give up 34 points. But the way they were able to play, especially in the first half, not to get too down on themselves, especially when Georgia was looking to stretch the lead even more going into the second half. They're able to respond out of the gates in the second half. It was kind of similar to how Georgia won the game in Athens. Georgia pretty much shut out Ole Miss 17-0 in the fourth quarter. Ole Miss did the same to start the third quarter. Ole Miss went on a little bit of run to get the lead back. At one point, Ole Miss went up 34-24. Georgia was able to respond, get back to a touchdown. Georgia did have an opportunity to take the lead. They had a first and goal. Weren't able to punch it in. They had to settle for a field goal to get that to 34-34. And then Georgia, had 50 seconds left to just hold them, get to overtime. And Trinidad Chambliss hits Deshaun Stribling for a fantastic pitch and catch to get to, that kicker just wouldn't have missed. It didn't matter if it was 60-yard field goal or 70-yard field goal. He ended up making that one to make it 37-34. And then you had some trickery, if you want to call it, more like the Georgia player just throwing it to who knows what. Ends up in a safety. Somehow Georgia gets the ball back. They have like 17,000 laterals. And the game finally ends after they put the stage on the field like 3 different times. But Ole Miss feels like the team of destiny in this run. We saw with Ohio State last year. Maybe we see the same magic with the Rebels. They will have a tough matchup yet again. But we said the same thing. I mean, Ole Miss knows, their offense, it doesn't really matter what type of defense that they play. Because heading into this one, we were very high on Georgia's defense, the way that they were playing. Ole Miss didn't really care about it because they still put up 30 points on a really impressive team. So I don't think that they're going to be too worried against a Miami defense. I know Miami's defensive front, like I mentioned, led by Ruben Bain, is definitely going to give them tricks. But the way that Trinidad Chambliss has been playing all season, you got to feel really confident about the Rebels moving forward.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, they seem unstoppable, but Miami's defense also seems immovable. So it's going to be
true.
Quite the matchup there. But in this one, I mean, just back and forth. Terrific plays by the quarterbacks, extending drives on third down, doing it with their feet, taking hard hits. I mean, it was really everything you'd want for between these two SEC teams. And honestly, this felt like the SEC championship.
This should have been. This should have been, honestly.
Yeah. I think these two teams were clearly the cream of the crop in the SEC this year. Just overall really good units. I know the score was high scoring, but that didn't mean the defense didn't make plays. They absolutely did. It's just how the game pace got going. Both teams were able to attack downfield and make shots. The only thing that I would say from this game that's a negative takeaway for Ole Miss just continues to be the coaching. distraction in all of this. I mean, you got an ever-changing staff. You don't really know who's in charge of what sometimes. I mean, that mistake right before halftime, and I know that the player stayed in bounds and whatever, but to put yourself in that situation where you don't have a timeout to use and you call a play that's designed to lead a receiver back into the field, I mean, that was just head scratching. And as we get a little closer to a championship here, I just, I could see that kind of being almost as kryptonite, but we'll see. Because the on the field product's fantastic. They seem to have the best kicker in the country too, so that always helps in a close game like this. On the Georgia side, I mean, Gunnar Stockton gave it his all. I think that Georgia was a little bit more limited this year at the skill positions, and the defense was young, but at the end of the day, they made plays. So I still think this team is probably the dynasty of the SEC, if you will. But it is cool to see some new blood like Ole Miss, being the last team standing from the conference.
Yeah, I don't think many people would have said that in the preseason. That's just the beauty of college football, especially in this new era that we're in. So that is all of our recaps of the semifinals. We'll now dive into some of our other key SEC bowl games. Starting off with the Music City Bowl in Tennessee versus Illinois. And like we mentioned about Illinois, they kind of are a roller coaster ride, but whenever it gets to the bowl season, they did last season with South Carolina. Now they do the same thing in the Music City. Pretty much a home crowd for Tennessee, and Illinois wins this one 30-28. My only concern for Tennessee in this one was their defense, because the entire defense this season has been a headache for the Volunteers. But Joey Aguilar did not have that great of a game either, only 118 passing yards in this one. It was more the rushing attack getting involved in this one. But Illinois, Luke Altmaier had a sensational game in this one, so you got to give credit to, once again, to Brett Bielema. He just knows how to coach him up in games like this. So Tennessee, the last time that they were in this Music City Bowl, they ended up losing to Purdue. And once again, they lose to Illinois, Big Ten representative. The SEC versus the Big Ten just hasn't been that good of a treat here in the bowl slate. So I know that we don't really have to get too much into this game, but overall, it has to be a disappointing season for the Vols.
Yeah, this is kind of the season I saw in store for them. Aguilar was a bright spot for them. I think he, played well most of the season, but this defense continued to let them down. And ultimately, I think some people figured out the Heupel offense, but I think this team fell short of expectations. I think that they thought they might make it back to the playoff, but all in all, just kind of a forgettable season.
Yeah, so we will now go on to the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl between another Big Ten SEC matchup. Number 18, Michigan versus number 13, Texas. And Texas puts up 40 on a very talented Michigan defense. 41-27 is your final. You did have a couple of opt-outs in this game due to transfer portal. You didn't have Trey Wisner or C.J. Baxter, as both of those running backs are looking for somewhere else. But it was the Arch Manning show. He had over 150 yards rushing as well as over 300 passing yards. So I think that all the doubt about Arch Manning is wiped away. He now has a full season under his belt in the starting position. And as the rumors that's flying around the transfer portal, they're going to throw money at guys like Cam Coleman, the wide receiver from Auburn, and Isaac Brown, the running back from Louisville. So I feel like Texas is going to be all in for next season. Their defense this year was young. They are going to lose a couple of pieces on the defensive side due to the NFL draft, but it's not going to be as seismic of a change as we saw from this past season to this season for guys losing to the NFL. You are going to be losing key guys like Michael Taft. But this Texas team, I feel really confident about, especially if you can get a guy like Cam Coleman and, even replace guys like Trey Wisner and C.J. Baxter with a guy like Isaac Brown. Then I would definitely feel very confident about this Texas offense, especially with the way that Arch Manning played in the second half of this season. So I think that the Texas, I wouldn't be surprised if we see them once again. They're probably not going to be number one. I feel like they are going to be at least in the top 5. But I know for my sake, I don't know how you feel early on about the 2026 season for Texas, but I feel like Texas feels just like a lock at this point to be a college football playoff team.
Well, I think that's certainly the expectation, but I mean, definitely a lot of moving parts. It'll be interesting to see who they bring in for sure. Because I mean, they did lose their two best running backs. They lost a 500-yard receiver. They lost another guy that I think led their
Yeah,
team in
Parker
receiving
Livingston.
touchdowns this year. Yeah, so I think that shows that they have big things in store because I don't think those guys would just willingly leave if they were going to be starters next year. So I think that Texas is about to spend a lot of money and bring in some really premier talent, but we'll have to see if they gel and can play well together. Like we've seen it at Indiana, or does this team kind of fall flat again and they don't gel? There's always the risk of that. That's kind of what we saw with Ohio State towards the end, honestly. So yeah, I mean, I expect them to be right where they were preseason, top 5, just like this year. Arch Manning, Heisman hype.
Yep. Pretty much deja vu.
Right, but I do think they're a little better off because I do think Arch Manning is talented, and I think that he's got that experience. So I think that'll kind of put him over the hump. I do expect them to make a playoff push, and for Michigan, I mean, I think they're going to be pretty good too. I know they'll be having a new coach, but they're going to spend in the portal as well. So this might be a little bit of a preview at potentially a first round game or something. You never know.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, Texas, they're going to be playing Ohio State once again at their place this time too.
That helps. That helps.
Yeah, that definitely helps too. But Texas getting one of the lone wins here in the SEC Bowl season. So big win for the Longhorns.
Yeah, honestly, kudos to you, Texas.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for actually showing up for the conference, unlike the majority of these teams. And we'll go on to the next team. Iowa, as much as we bash them, they always show up in the
Only
postseason.
time they score north of 30 points is when they head south.
Yes, absolutely. They just love Tampa, and especially in Nashville. But number 23, Iowa faced off against number 14, Vanderbilt. And it was the Iowa Hawkeyes getting this win 34-27. Vanderbilt's defense played very poorly in this one. I mean, Vanderbilt's defense have had some games this season where they put it all together. Diego Pavia had another Diego Pavia showing. It was a slow start, though. Iowa was firmly in control in this game heading to the half. Vanderbilt just wasn't able to take the lead, though, late in this game. Iowa, they just couldn't stop Iowa's offense. Like maybe they just didn't look at every other Big Ten defensive plan of they were able to stop Iowa. But like Wade and I mentioned, it's just some voodoo about Iowa going down to Tampa Bay. They just find their offense and they get a bowl win. So Vandy, I think overall it was a really good season for them. I know that it ended on a sour note with this loss to Iowa, but still 10 wins. I mean, they would take that every single day. Now we look at what's going to happen with no Diego Pavia, without Eli Stowers. That is definitely going to be your top 2 guys that you're losing on the offensive side of the ball. You are bringing in a true freshman 5-star recruit. We will see if he gets the start. But Vandy, this is definitely going to be a team like many in the SEC. They're definitely going to look at some transfer portal additions. But Vandy, I think that this is definitely going to be a big question mark heading into next season if they can sustain the success post Diego Pavia.
Yeah, that's what I'm curious to see. Kind of like we talked about with Indiana. Does this team build on the success, or do they just kind of reflect on the season and plan a homecoming game for Diego Pavia to come back? I mean, I kind of hope that they keep this momentum going. I think you have one of the better minds of college football coaching you. You seem to have some NIL resources and an upgraded stadium. So I know that Vanderbilt has the 5-star freshman quarterback coming in, and I'm sure that there was some promises made to him. But in today's era of college football, I would go get a proven quarterback that can kind of serve as the bridge. I don't think they're going to get one of the top 5 guys out there, but maybe you go get, a senior that's coming from a group of 5 team that's looking for a shot, and you let them compete with the 5-star freshman Jared Curtis and see where it takes you. Because I mean, I just think there's a lot of momentum and a lot of talent on this roster for Vanderbilt going forward that they could ascend into a top 5 team in the SEC next year, or we could see them back in the bottom 5 if they don't, make some sort of move.
Yeah, for sure. We did have one more SEC bowl game. It was the Duke's Mayo Bowl, Wake Forest against Mississippi State, but no really need to recap because Mississippi State outside of Brandon Thompson didn't really show me too much to even talk about them. But overall, it's a step in the right direction. I mean, you go 2-10 now, 5-8. Hopefully you're able to build up on that. If you can keep Kamario Taylor, I know that he did suffer an injury. Looks like it wasn't that serious as I thought it was, because I thought it was going to be a torn ACL. Mississippi State was going to be screwed next season. But with Zach Arnett coming back, this defense needs a whole entire revamp. Same with the offensive line, because those are two areas that need some retooling if they do want to actually get to the 6-win mark and not get a pity bowl invite because you won 5 wins, and teams like Notre Dame and Iowa State and Auburn decided opted out of the bowl game. But that is it for all of our recaps. We will continue with the recaps for the semifinals and then the national championship. But for now, that is it for this week's bowl recap. Now let's dive into our College Football Playoff Quarterfinals and SEC bowl games. As you can see, the SEC screwed us, as well as the playoff games didn't really do too well. Wade, you did save at least at a 500 record with 4-4. I had one of my worst showings in the pick'ems with 2-6, and Chet is at 3-5. So overall, kind of a mid outing from all of us. We will see if we can bounce back with just a couple of games left for the semifinals of the national championship. But overall, on the bowl season, I think that Wade, myself, and I think Chet are the top 3. I'll have to go back and check if that is correct. But whenever that's all said and done, I will bring that results as well. And speaking of results, we will continue with that to SEC Fantasy postseason results. We already had one segment of results dating back all the way to the first round, where I took that as the stipulations were pretty much simple. If I won one more week, the SEC Fantasy crown would go to myself. But if Wade continues his catching up like he's always done this season, then he would get the crown. So first, we will start with our College Football Playoff Quarterfinal team. So, Wade, why don't you kick it off of how your team did?
Yeah. Not too hot at the start there.
Start at the quarterback position.
Yeah. Ty Simpson getting hurt, and Alabama's just general dud of a game really hurt me in this one. You definitely expect to at least hit triple digits with your quarterback. You hope to hit 200 plus and flirt with 300 to have a chance. But that just wasn't the case for Alabama and Ty Simpson. I think he's had a pretty good season. I felt confident picking him here with the season on the line. But he really did not have a good performance. And I think he's had some injuries hobbling him. So it'll be interesting to see if Alabama welcomes him back, if he goes to the NFL, or if Austin Mack is the future. But if this was his last appearance for the Crimson Tide, a measly 84 yards is all it showed for. So unfortunate there. Nate Frazier, I think that he was definitely a bright spot for the Georgia Bulldogs. Like you said, he got off to a quick start. I think he had 50 or 60 yards, maybe even at the end of the first quarter. Game script kind of got away from him. Gunnar Stockton took over. They had to air it out to pace with that Ole Miss offense. And at the end of the day, 128 yards in a playoff game is absolutely fantastic. So kudos to him. Dejon Stribling, hello, welcome. A great debut here for me on SEC Fantasy. He, of course, had the big catch at the end of the game that got Ole Miss in the field goal range. I think he picked up like 30 or 40 yards on that pass. So that brought him into triple digits as well. And just a really good game for him. Trey Wallace would have been the pick. He was flirting with 200 yards and had 2 touchdowns, but Stribling was a big part of their game plan as well. And the Georgia defense, they made some plays, but they let up a lot of yards because Trinidad Chambliss was really on point. So when your quarterback doesn't get you 100 and your defense lets over 400, you're kind of lucky to be at negative 140 because it could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, I thought we were going to set an all-time record, but honestly, you would have been good with all Ole Miss picks, even their defense. I mean, they were
Yeah,
overall yardage-wise. I know that Trinidad Chambliss, man, we definitely
that
missed
was the
out
pick.
on picking Trinidad Chambliss this week. But negative 139. We will see if you can hold on or not. But it feels like SEC fantasy might already be over. As you look now at my roster, Gunnar Stockton, like I mentioned, 223 yards. It was a slow start for him. Obviously, Trinidad Chambliss, like I mentioned, would have been the pick of the week for the quarterbacks, but solid overall performance by Stockton. I mean, like you mentioned, he put his body on the line pretty much for this game, ended up falling short. Gwan Lacey just continues to be Mr. Consistent. I mean, he shows up to the field and he can put up 100 yards no matter what. It was actually 80 yards on the ground, 20 through the air and the receiving yards, so to get him to 110. Zachariah Branch was the leading receiver for the Georgia Dogs, 67 yards. We will see if Branch is going to be returning or not for Georgia. He does have a couple of years of eligibility. He transferred in from this season to USC, so we'll see if we do see Branch back. That would definitely be a nice addition for this Georgia offense. And then Alabama's defense, honestly, could have been way worse. 407 yards. I mean, you give up 38 points, and the game was never even close. And the total still in the negatives, -7. So that officially clinches SEC fantasy. After I had the lead for pretty much the majority of the season, it ends in the semifinal round. But that doesn't mean that SEC fantasy is over, as we still have to go to some more results to our non-SEC bowls. So, Wade, let's see if you can stay out of the positives this time, or the negatives.
Yeah, well, really know how to pick him at quarterback, don't I?
You got to
can I get
that's for sure.
Aguilar and Simpson's combined total so I can maybe sniff 200 yards?
Yeah, 200 yards.
Yeah, just not a good day here for Aguilar either. He did play in this game in its entirety. He was missing Chris Brazel, his top receiver, but that's no excuse because we've seen this Illinois defense get shredded at times. Just an off day for Tennessee. 118 yards. Ahmad Hardy, we recapped his game last week. They had one of the earlier bowl games. He did very well, but overall Missouri was pretty limited by their quarterback play, so I'm starting to see a trend here. Trey'Daz Green, we recapped his game as well. He paced the Tigers with 80 receiving yards, including a touchdown or 2 touchdowns, huh? Yeah.
Yep, he did.
So really good showing for him, and he's going to be back for the Tigers. So I'm interested to see what Lane Kiffin does with them. Lane Kiffin's never really had that like prototypical NFL blocking tight end, but they have had good tight end play on the receiving side. So, I mean, I think we could really see Green elevate his game. Potentially, he could even switch to receiver depending on what LSU is able to do in the portal. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on. And then the Vanderbilt defense, honestly, it was a very ugly game for them. But they were able to keep it under 400, which isn't too bad in bowl games. But my team was not able to keep it out of the negatives as the quarterback play continues to doom me.
Yeah, your 2 quarterbacks and defenses did not do you any favors. But like you mentioned, we will see Hardy and Green for next season's SEC fantasy. So I'm sure both of those guys will have a ton of airtime once again. So now let's go on to my team to see if we could sweep it. As you can tell, well, my team definitely showed up. Obviously, I did pick Trey Wisner, but Trey Wisner and CJ Baxter was not available, so I went with the next available, and that was Christian Clark. And, man, he had himself a hell of a performance, 105 yards against a very talented Michigan defensive front. Diego Pavia, 383 total yards, most of that through the air. I know that he did get a couple of rushing yards. It wasn't like that crazy rushing game that he had against Tennessee. But really good enough for 383 yards, and that's a hell of a way to go out for your SEC fantasy career. We will see if we have any other quarterbacks stop him for next season. Brennan Thompson, like I mentioned, one of the lone bright spots in Mississippi State's bowl game against Wake Forest, 106 yards. He had 80 received yards heading into the half, so he honestly probably could have had 200 or more. Texas defense, 373 total yards, so pretty similar stat line to The Vanderbilt defense, there was definitely a lot of opt-outs for the defensive side for Texas. So not really too concerned with that unit moving forward. But overall, 221. I think that I would pretty much lap you on both scores as you stayed in the negative. So overall, I swept the SEC fantasy postseason. Wade definitely had a struggle both at the quarterback and the defense, but I'm sure that he will bounce back next season because I know that the postseason ended really poorly for you, but the comeback that you had was definitely a storyline for the SEC fantasy, don't you think?
Yeah, I just need to get some wins in September, man, so it doesn't come down to.
It's been 2 straight seasons. It feels like it's yeah.
I know I'm like the Cincinnati Bengals or something where I don't wake up until the end of the year, but yeah, I mean it's just always hard with the bowl games with the opt-outs. So honestly, to only have one substitution, I think that was a positive for us, and we'll have to see if maybe Christian Clark's a guy that is the reason why those guys are in the portal. I mean, maybe he's the future. I don't really know much about him, but a good ad there for you.
Yeah, overall, a really good SEC fantasy season. I really enjoyed doing this segment. I'm glad that Wade brought this up a couple of years back to add it in. It's really been fun. I hope to continue this in 2026. So that is it for SEC fantasy. Now we will dive into our 2 college football playoff semifinal games. The first one will be on Thursday night. So we'll have one game on Thursday night, and then the next one will be on Friday night. And then the national championship will be not the Monday following, but the Monday after that. So the first one is the Verbo Fiesta Bowl out there in Arizona at the Cardinals home stadium. We had the number 10 seed Miami versus the number 6 seed Ole Miss. So a lot of upsets on this side of the bracket. Miami getting the big win over Ohio State. Ole Miss getting their big win in New Orleans against Georgia. So this feels like the 2 teams of destiny, at least on this side of the bracket. But what are you looking most forward to watching in this game? And ultimately, who do you have advancing to the national championship?
Man, this is tough because it's probably the hottest defense in the country versus the hottest offense. I just think that Trinidad Chambliss is such a game changer, man. Like I just feel like we could see him take this game over. We've seen Miami's defense get exposed at times. They've looked really good, in this playoff run. But I just think Trinidad Chambliss is different, man. I think he's going to get it done. I know it's a little weird right now with Ole Miss, with the coaching staff fluctuating, but, it's been doing that for the last month or so, so I guess it's all right. And as long as Charlie Weiss is dialing up plays for Trinidad, I think this offense carries them over the top. And it's just been a really special run for Ole Miss.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a special run for both teams. I mean, Miami, like heading into that selection show, they weren't even thought of being in the 12-team field. And then they made that flip between Miami and Notre Dame because Miami beat the Irish in week number 1. And they took that. They have been, it feels like a team on a mission and like a team just trying to prove that they definitely belong. And they have definitely proved it up to now. Like they shut out pretty much a Texas A&M offense that was one of the best offenses here in the SEC. And then one of the best offenses in the Big Ten. They only held them to 14 points. And now they get a high-powered Ole Miss offense that feels like scores. Like they score like 30 points. It feels like every time that they play a defense like this. So it feels like this is going to be one of the biggest challenges for Ole Miss, especially their defensive front, especially for Kawan Lacey. I mean, you got Ruben Bain waiting for you in between the tackles. So it feels like whoever wins the line of scrimmage, both on the defensive and offensive line, is going to win this game. Like you mentioned, Ole Miss, Trinidad Chambliss is a game changer. Carson Beck has been in these big-time situations when he was back at Georgia, so he's not going to be scared at all at the moment. If Mark Fletcher can continue to be the dominant running back that he can be, and especially with the receivers, with Tony, who has been a sensational freshman wide receiver, even C.J. Daniels has made a couple of big catches in this postseason run for Miami. So there's definitely going to be a lot of storylines on both sides, but it just feels like Ole Miss right now. With the way that Trinidad Chambliss, I feel like a guy like that making those type of plays, I'm going to go to that team with this pick here. I don't know. I'm not even going to try to give you a score prediction because I think that this could either be like a low-scoring game, come down to the wire, or a high-scoring game where a team and offense just has to score 30. But I'm going to go with the Rebels clinching their first national championship appearance in program history. So we're both going with the SEC representative, and Chet going the opposite way. It's just Chet picking Miami in any postseason, whether it's March Madness, playoff. He's going to go with Miami, but I'm glad to see not all of us going with the same team here, as we do have a little bit of disagreement. Wade and I going with the SEC representative. I guess we're just trusting the SEC once again. We will see if this bites us in the butt or not, but Chet going the opposite way, going with Miami. Honestly think that this is going to be a split 50-50 right now. Miami is a 3.5-point favorite if you look on sports books. But I just think that this is going to be a terrific game to lead off the semifinal round. Now let's move on to the other matchup. Like I mentioned, is going to be on Friday night, and that is a Big Ten showdown. So the Big Ten is guaranteed once again to make it to the national championship. And if Indiana and Oregon, they definitely have a real good shot to make it 3 in a row for the Big Ten. We saw Ohio State last season, then Michigan 2 years ago. So the Big Ten really has an opportunity to plant its flag as being the best conference here of all college football. But last time that we saw both of these teams was all the way back, it feels like early October in Eugene. It feels like everybody was very high on Oregon, because if you mentioned that was like they were just coming off of that big win at Penn State. Indiana was still rolling through their non-conference schedule, just starting up Big Ten play. This was really the start of this Indiana dominant run. From this game on, it has just been a complete wagon for Indiana. So like I mentioned, Indiana did win that game pretty convincingly. I know that the score didn't really show it. This is definitely going to be a treat down there in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl to, Oregon coming all the way from the West Coast, Indiana coming from the Midwest. So there's definitely going to be a lot of travel for both of these teams. And I'm sure that both fan bases will definitely make their mark in the ATL. But with all that being said, who do you have advancing to the national championship? In your prediction, you already have Ole Miss. Who advances and will play the Rebs?
Yeah, I mean, we've just talked so much about Indiana on this show. I think they got, dare to say, maybe the second best playmaker left. I think Trinidad Chambliss right now is hot, but I'd take Mendoza any day of the week as well.
Yeah.
And the defense. I think the defense is what puts them over the edge to me. Honestly, these are the two best defenses remaining, but I trust Indiana's a little bit more overall as a team. So I'm going to go with the Hoosiers. So I guess my national championship game is two of the teams on magical runs, program-defining seasons, whatever you want to call it. So, I think Miami would fit in that category too. Yeah. But, Indiana and Ole Miss certainly aren't teams that you would expect to see in the College Football National Championship. So that would be pretty cool. But, don't count Oregon out. They've already seen this Indiana team. They played them close, but it just jumps out at me that Indiana was able to go up to Oregon and win that game. And I don't think Indiana was at their best at that point.
Yeah. They were just getting started, in my opinion.
Yeah, so that's a dangerous thing that they were able to do that kind of, not at their peak. Plus, you mentioned the travel factor. I think that helps Indiana. You might be saying, well, wouldn't it make sense for Miami and Ole Miss to play in Atlanta and for Oregon and Indiana to play in the desert? But that would actually present a pretty big advantage to Oregon, in my opinion. So yeah. I'm sure Indiana is happy that this one is, in Eastern time. And, man, I think we're going to be in for a treat Thursday and Friday for these games for sure.
Yeah, I think we're really in a treat for two really good games. Like I always mention, when I talk about rematches, it's always tough to beat a team twice in the season. But this Indiana team is just different, in my opinion. Two really talented defenses. But I just trust the playmakers on Indiana. There's nothing against Oregon's offense. But Oregon's offense, to me, has been shaky down the stretch here. Indiana's offense, like I mentioned, every single week, it doesn't matter what team that they're playing. They're just put out some points. I know that Ohio State, when they played, they only put up 13. But I just think that this is going to be a defensive grudge match. But Indiana, I just feel like they are just a team of destiny at this point. So give me the Hoosiers. Chet also going with the Hoosiers for a clean sweep in this Big Ten rematch. So right now, Wade and I are set with our national championship with Indiana Ole Miss. Chet going with Indiana Miami. Honestly, I would be fine with any matchups because I think that you're going to get something new. You're not going to get like the Alabama Georgia or like Ohio State or whatever. This is going to be like something new, and this is why like as much as like we say we hate this era of like paying players, like the fact that we have Oregon and Indiana and Ole Miss and Miami in a semifinal game, it really feels like a March Madness like type of run for a lot of these teams, don't you say?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's a mix. I mean, Indiana definitely has used the portal, but I feel like they, at the core of it, they have to make the right coaching hire. And I don't think Mendoza was like the odds-on best quarterback in the portal either. So I mean, there's some development there, and I think it's good to see regional differences here. I think we have a West Coast team, a Midwest team, ACC, and an SEC team represented, and not necessarily the traditional powerhouse in each conference that would have been there in the last 10 years. So I think this is good. I mean, college football is ever changing for better or for worse. But I'm quite pleased with the product I've seen this playoff and what we've got to look forward to with this Final Four and then the championship.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're really looking forward to watching both of these games to close out this week. But now let's dive into our hot topics. Before we dive into our SEC hot topics, I do want to go back to discussion of the first round bye because we saw it last year, 0-4. This year, only one team got it. Indiana was the only team out of the top 4 seed. And, you saw Alabama only score 3 points. Ohio State's offense only scored 14. And Texas Tech did get shut out. So you think, what do you think is like any excuse with the first round bye, lay off? Should the format change? Or what are your thoughts overall on that?
I think it's just too much time off. I mean, let's look at the NFL. They finished their regular season today, and they'll start the playoffs next week. I think that you want to just kind of stay in that groove. The NFL lets 14 teams in. The top 2 teams get a bye, but even then it's only a week. So, maybe it's something like that. Or maybe you go to 16. I think playing a home game in the first round might be just as beneficial as a bye week, honestly. Just get the playoff nerves out, play a team that you should be better than, and you get to play them at your home stadium. So I think that's where we're headed. Probably a 16 team, no buys, move it up a week, try to get this thing wrapped up, maybe tomorrow as opposed to 2 Mondays from now.
Yeah, it just feels like at any point in time that we are going to get to expansion. It's just a matter of how many teams that you added on. It goes to 16. Does it go to more than that? I guess we will find out in due time. But let's go now into our hot topics, focus in on the SEC. The first one, Kentucky quarterback Cutter Boley transfers to Arizona State. I think that you and I were pretty set that he was just going to return. Obviously not, as he is going on now to Arizona State. So is Sam Leavitt entering the transfer portal. Cutter Boley will now be the QB1 for Arizona State. So any surprise on that news that Boley is leaving Kentucky?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I felt like Kentucky could have built around him. I thought he was a capable SEC quarterback. But I kind of went down a Twitter rabbit hole on this one, and a lot of people think that Sam Leavitt was kicked off the Arizona State team and that Kenny Dillingham is just kind of doing him a solid by singing his praises, trying to get him a new home. But, I mean, this was a very quick move. And we've also heard Leavitt in the mix for the Kentucky job. So it could be another swap like we saw with Tennessee and UCLA. But if you just look at the timeline of Leavitt's transfer out of Arizona State, he didn't attend the last game. He didn't attend the team banquet. Really not much of a push from Dillingham, who is a big portal guy to keep him. And he was very quick to go get his replacement in Boley. So it'll be interesting to see where he ends up, but I think it's a good ad for Arizona State.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see what Kentucky does now. If they find a transfer quarterback, like you mentioned, Sam Levitt did went on a visit to Lexington. So we will see where Sam Levitt, whether that's at Texas Tech or maybe if it's at LSU or a school like Kentucky. Now let's move on to Georgia. Georgia defensive tackle announced today that Christian Miller is entering the NFL draft. So we will see how the Dogs will replace that talent on their defensive front heading into next season. The next bit of news, you're seeing a lot of this week that players are just re-signing, I guess, these contracts or just finding a new deal. This one now out of College Station, Texas A&M quarterback Marcel Reed announced his return for 2026. So what do you think about this overall? I think that a lot of people, I don't like, where else was he going to go? But with Colin Klein now exiting to Kansas City, where do you think that this offense is going to go? You don't have Casey Concepcion. You do have Mario Craver. It sounds like you are in the mix for guys like Cam Coleman and a lot of other wide receivers. So what do you think that this overall makeup of this offense and the direction of this offense is heading into the 2026 season?
I think it's in good shape. I mean, I think A&M is going to be one of those teams that just retools. I think they'll be in the mix for Cam Coleman as well. I think that they'll potentially add maybe a proven SEC back, like maybe Caden Durham would be a good fit, or one of the Texas guys. So I think they're going to make some moves to build around Marcel Reed. I think they'll try to emulate the same offense. Casey Concepcion's a really talented guy, so I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be plug and play, but Mario Craver, I mean, he was as good of a number 2 as you could have. So yeah. I think this team's going to be just fine, and I still believe in Marcel Reed. I mean, that was just kind of a weird fluky game against Miami, and now we know that this Miami defense is really legit. They shut down a Heisman finalist in Julian Sayin.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get into the final hot topic. A little early question on next season. We'll get into more of these questions in next week's show. We do a little bit of a way too early 2026 SEC preview. But let's go ahead and dive into this one. Which SEC team, in your opinion, has the most pressure heading into next season?
Well, I think it's probably Alabama.
Yeah.
They're not in bad shape. They've made the playoff twice. Under Kalen DeBoer, a lot of programs would be very happy with that. But at the same time, they lost 4 games. Oh, they did not make the playoff last year. That's right.
Yeah.
So, did not make the playoff last year, made the playoff this year, but lost 4 games. I don't know. I mean, that's just not the Alabama standard.
Mm-hmm.
If the Texas teams continue to win, if Georgia continues to win, if surprise teams like Ole Miss or LSU jump them, I think Alabama's going to get pretty restless. I mean, Texas is going to have a lot of pressure as well, but I think they're more suited to meet expectations. I don't know that you can convince me that Alabama is a unanimous top 5 team in the SEC next year.
Yeah, I agree. I think, Alabama is definitely a good pick. For me, it's more like a team that we're not expecting to make the College Football Playoff. But I feel like everything is surrounding Shane Beamer in South Carolina next season, especially with their 3 big players coming back. You have Lenore's coming back for another season, Nick Harbor, Dylan Stewart also coming back, one of your best defensive players. If he doesn't make a bowl game, he's out of town at that point. Even if he go 6-6 or 7-5, I'm not sure if South Carolina fans even want him anymore after that. It feels like he needs 8 or 9 wins or even more to even keep his job in Columbia. But you are bringing in Art Briles from offense coordinator. I mean, the offense was abysmal under the recent offensive coordinator. The name is escaping him. Maybe Wade can help me on that. It was just a terrible season. But with South Carolina, going now into the 9-game schedule, we will see. I mean, their schedule was absolutely brutal this season. I know it's not going to ease up any lighter, especially when you're adding in another conference schedule, and you still have Clemson on the schedule. I know that Clemson is pretty much going to be overhauling their offense and defense, especially with a lot. I mean, Clemson's going to be just a way new team, and with Dabo, he never wants to use a transfer portal.
Yeah, they might be getting a transfer QB.
Yeah, he's going to need a lot of guys, especially at the quarterback position, especially on defense. You're losing a lot of guys on that defensive front. But it feels like South Carolina overall, like obviously doesn't have a lot of high expectations, but it feels like overall pressure, it feels like it's on South Carolina, especially with, like I mentioned, with the 3 players coming back. We'll see if they add anything in the transfer portal. I'm sure that they will. But it feels like it's going to be a do or die season for Shane Beamer and the Gamecocks in 2026. So we will definitely have plenty of time to talk about the 2026 season. Like I mentioned, we'll have another show next week. We'll recap both the semifinal matchups between Indiana and Oregon, as well as Ole Miss and Miami. We'll do a little bit of an early national championship preview. We won't make our picks until the following show, but we will also put a bow on our 2025 SEC season. We'll also do a little bit of a dive into the 2026 season, maybe some teams that are catching our eyes and maybe some teams that are not quite there yet. So we'll have 2 more shows, at least in the football season. We'll have our SEC season recap as well as our national championship preview. So 2 more shows in store for football, and we might have some more shows in the spring. We're still in talks on that. That's not a for sure thing, but we may be bringing in some baseball talk for you heading into this new year. So we will keep you all updated on that. If we do go to that, it's not going to be like an every week show. It's going to be like an every month show that we're doing there, just looking at the overall series, and we'll also maybe be implementing another SEC fantasy, but that's just something that is in talks. We will definitely confirm that if we do go that route here in the next couple of weeks, because I know baseball is just right around the corner with the season starting in mid-February. But that's going to be it for this week's SEC Talk Show. I hope everybody enjoyed their new year. Hopefully, 2025 from 2026 gets a little bit better for you, whether that's, starting a new gym regimen or whatever you want to do here in the new year. But we appreciate everybody for tuning in to this week's show, and we will catch you next week as we recap the semifinal round. So for SEC Talk, that is it for us, and we will see you next time. So long for now.